Here's a thought experiment that I just thought of this afternoon. Um, okay, my basic problem with the usual, Darwinist, naturalist, evolutionist tendency to define, quote unquote, all religion as equal to insanity. Okay, that's the way I would put it. Is basically they're looking for or defining philosophically an objective standard of truth to be based in, well, God is a fantasy. Well, okay, first of all, that's bad physics. Okay, I don't have the background to prove that, but I just recently ran across uh, uh, what purported to be a proof in physics that it may be possible that, like, consciousness defines reality. Okay, that the act of having been observed causes particles to act differently, and implications like that are just staggering. So, before you get to God is dead, you basically, you have to solve physics for a theoretically infinite set of dimensions. Okay, that's the absurdity of the process to begin with. But let's just go back to the specific comments that, like, I made just recently on Google. Uh, I've been attacked twice now in a very pejorative manner by a gentleman calling himself Finite Atticus, and he's doing things like, well, if any evidence that I present won't change your mind anyway, then, and this is an exact quote. Okay, this is an exact quote, but the problem with this being an exact quote is that I suspect that, since he is in control of the thread, he may actually try to edit or delete my comment. There's a practice I just found out about on the internet called dirty deleting. Okay, which is a way to slant information in an unethical manner, basically doing dirty edits. Okay. And the thing is that information as information can be manipulated that way. That's the approximation. So, like, whether or not you're enough of a philosopher to get into questions like the subjective versus the objective nature of reality, etc. Okay, even setting that up as a dipolar argument, it is you reach a point, whereas my intellectual mentor C.S. Lewis said, that all answers deceive. Okay, any answer you arrive at as a human being, you reach a point where all answers deceive. And like, one of the Darwinist assumptions, this is one that, like, emotionally just flabbergasts me. I don't understand it. Okay, that may be the extent of my delusion, is that I don't understand it. But the problem I have with the presumption that we're finite beings who die dead and go poof, basically, and there's nothing after this, is literally, okay, the tradition of man. Even assuming that, like, all religions were an artifact of evolution, and there are models that you can do that. Okay, there are models that you can do that. But let's assume just for the moment that like there was no absolute true God, and atheists came out with, like, what they considered a binding mathematical. First of all, mathematics proves nothing. Okay, mathematics proves nothing because it needs to be morally neutral territory containing certain symbols that you can use to prove anything you like. Okay, because it can prove everything, it proves nothing. Okay, that's the limitations of mathematics as a human system. And, the Christian premise, if you will, is that we as human beings don't really understand the nature of eternity. Okay, and never mind, like, is there an eternal God, or even the standard science fiction speculations which tend toward a tradition of, can man become God by, how close to godhood is man if you get to, say, Gallifrey and the Time Lords, Doctor Who. Okay, premise of that show is a madman in a magical blue box who can travel anywhere in space and time that he damn well wants. Okay? But, see, basically, whether you believe in God or not, or like God being real or not, okay, there are frameworks in which the whole question of, like, virtual versus real, or real versus imaginary, is a false choice. Okay, there are scientific frameworks in which real versus imaginary is a false choice. First of all, okay. But let's just assume, as like a sociological reality, or a philosophical reality, or God forbid, a governmental reality. See, this is the problem. This is the problem. Aldous Huxley postulated a governmental, enforceable, sociological reality in which all of the traditions of, like, trying to find God or trying to practice religion, whatever, had been scrapped as an opening premise. And you know what happened? Okay, I don't want to provide spoilers to the book, but since I'm using the book for a model of a thesis, I really have to do this. Okay. What happened is that basically you got a culture that, first of all, was, like, obsessed with sex. As a matter of fact, they were not only obsessed with sex, but they had for example, they had outlawed monogamy. They had gotten to the point where they outlawed carrying carrying a child in the body, because all the children that the state needed were literally grown in test tubes. Hello, Veritasia National Anthem. All right. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. When you consider the actual hero trying to break out of this framework, trying to get back to a point where, basically when everybody is supposed to be happy, he's not happy. All right? And the reason he's not happy is that he is one of what C.S. Lewis called the moral conditioners. Okay, it's his job to actually write the slogans that they use in the sleep teaching for all these test tube grown embryos. Okay, so he knows how this framework was developed. Okay, I would be really, really intrigued, really, really interested about whether Aldous Huxley was actually writing this writing this as a scientist, or was he writing it as a Christian? See, that's the thing. It's a brilliant work on ethics, if you like, from either position, whether he's a scientist or whether he's a Christian writing this. And see, this is the danger of, for example, lay people thinking they know enough theology to say that, well, this individual person in this individual ministry needs to be attacked because here's my evidence, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, you should only be using the King James Bible. All right, I ran into a video just like that. I'm not going to mention the person's name. I ran into a video just like that just this afternoon, folks. Okay, so, there is a massive, massive problem with the way we're handling information theory. There's a massive, massive problem with the way we're handling our philosophy, with the way we're handling our theology, with the way we're handling the whole doctrine of the respect of persons, let alone the doctrine of, like, is there any such thing anymore as quote unquote valid individual action authority. Okay, I'm not even asking about opening moral premises anymore. See, that's the thing. You get into territory that involves so many disciplines at once when you start making your presence known on the internet, that you very quickly, it doesn't matter what subject you're studying, you get into a phenomenon called information overload. Okay, the best way I know how to get around information overload, some of the best training available on the planet, even for marketing as a discrete discipline. Okay, let alone the marketing of information. Okay, or the ways information is spun in order to sell stuff. That's part of the problem with information overload. Now that I've taken a life direction, and it's not just a matter of I find myself undereducated, okay, but whatever specific educational track I take, there's always going to be somebody who is not only better educated, but they're probably educated in a completely different discipline, let alone a completely different view of logic about whatever I choose to believe as a human being. And this is the human condition. Okay, this is the human condition. So if I did nothing more than provide a better sociological definition of the human need for God, that would be like a career level dynamic already. Okay, even I'm being confronted with the question, well, do I really want to be, quote unquote, the next C.S. Lewis? What am I really wanting to do with my life? Okay, and I just recently discovered Clark's Law. I just recently discovered Pascal's wager. I just recently discovered a concept called the ought is gap. Okay, which actually, Lewis didn't believe in the ought is gap. All right, and again, for a Darwinist scientific naturalist, that's a real problem. Okay, that's a genuine problem. So, like, no matter how experimental or how civil I try to be with my language in expressing any idea whatsoever as an individual, okay, there's always going to be a gap in what I know. There's always going to be somebody somewhere who is basing themselves off like a completely emotional reaction, as an open. They don't even have a logical premise. They just have this gut reaction that they're spewing all over the internet. Okay, and one of the questions I raised this afternoon with a gentleman I caught doing this was, basically, well, his argument was your information is like obviously false because blah blah blah. Okay, and even if I wanted to grant his logic, okay, the problem in ethics is it legally actionable in a public international forum to like go and cuss somebody out? All right, according to certain things I know about FCC rules, because I'm a ham radio operator, and like, if to whatever extent the FCC controls the function of the internet, it is potentially legally actionable when you go swearing on the internet, at least in what's defined as a public space. One of these spaces where like anybody can find your comments. Okay, so there's this other problem with like defining verbal violence. Okay, let alone problems with defining what constitutes domestic violence, so on and so forth. Another example of what I call the apocalypse fever. All right, one of the reasons why Christians are like afraid of atheistic evolution is that not only do we believe it leads to a logical premise that okay, it's not so much that we believe it leads to a logical premise that is false. It's because of like what we believe about the nature of evil. Okay, what we believe about the nature of evil. Never mind, arguments based on, well, because you're an evolutionist, you're quote unquote a son of the devil. Okay, that's I'm attempting to demonstrate why that's bad theology, let alone bad logic. Okay, and basically, to the Darwinistic naturalist, I'm basically saying, yeah, you don't agree with my premise, so basically, if there is no such thing as a moral code as like enforced by enforced by a god. See, this is the problem with making the equation that God equals delusion. Okay, and that's basically the emotional equation that a Darwinist would make philosophically. It's emotionally appealing. It's appealing by whatever they consider their version of logic to be. Christians are illogical. Muslims are illogical. Jews are illogical. Pagans are illogical. The American Indian tradition is equally illogical. Paganism and witchcraft is equally illogical. It doesn't matter. Okay, they're trying to use as a general applicable principle the idea that all religion everywhere is illogical. Okay, And what they're doing by doing that, ladies and gentlemen, there's another principle called Clarke's Law. Okay, there's another principle called Clarke's Law, and Clarke's Law goes like this. Any sufficiently advanced technology is in fact indistinguishable from magic. Okay? Even if you apply Clarke's Law to the so-called God of the Gaps theory, in other words, we like to put God in charge of everything we don't understand. Okay? In other words, just because the questions are hard, this is the evolutionist argument, just because the questions are hard to answer, okay, my intellectual ego defense, quote unquote, is always phrased as rather than using logic. Okay, rather than using science, because God is not equal to science, rather than using logic, a Christian or a theist of any type whatsoever will retreat to a theory called God of the Gaps. In other words, God is in charge of everything I don't understand. Okay, well, even granting God of the Gaps as a theory, okay, eventually you reach a point where, like, all the human symbols break down. Okay? It doesn't matter what symbols you're using. They all break down somewhere. Alright? There's a doctrine in logic as a discipline called the a priori assumption, which is that you have to start from somewhere, and it's a useless argument to try and go back and prove what you're taking for the primary premise of the argument in any proof. Okay, so, like, if I'm going to argue, okay, so like, if you're gonna argue that, like, XYZ is true, then there are certain steps that you need to go through. There are certain steps that you need to go to not to prove, but to agree to begin with your primary thesis point and your definition of terms. Okay. And like, one of the problems that I have with M theory, which is the latest Darwinist naturalist attempt to use pure mathematics, quote unquote. That's why it's called M theory, is pure mathematics. Okay. Even if you don't take as read my assumption that mathematics proves nothing because you can make it say anything. Okay. The problem I have with M theory is that in order to eliminate God from M theory, they still had to account for the spontaneous generation of universes, plural, universes. Okay? So basically, they gave God more glory when they did that. Okay? If God doesn't exist, then you still have an ex nihilo creation. Okay? And see, here is where it breaks down. Well, okay, I'm just getting frustrated with this whole process, because literally there's a principle I was taught by the Empower Network. Back to the Empower Network again. Okay, is like, no matter what you do on the internet, you don't know what you don't know. Okay, that's logically that's a tautology, but it's also the truth. You do not know what you do not know. Law of identity. All right. Um, and so basically, trying to treat the internet. The problem with trying to treat the internet as like one big vast video game, and pretend that it's easy to function as an individual on the internet is, you run across any number of random strangers who've been trained in any number of random disciplines and may shoot down your argument at any moment. Okay, whether you're trying to sell something or argue for religion, argue against religion, um, argue for a particular phenomenon in science, in sociology, in law, um, whatever the discipline is. Sometimes the information is simply inaccessible to you because we depend on our experts as human beings. We, by definition, we depend on our experts to be able and willing to ethically present information that is corrected out to the limit of understanding of the general public. Okay, and this is the problem I have with people like Richard Dawkins saying that effectively religion is a disease. Okay, he doesn't even give it the respect of a historical artifact, folks. It's a disease. Okay, because the John Q. Public thing that he did was he handed off this T-shirt, "Religion Together We Can Find the Cure." He handed it off to, oh God, I can't even remember his name. Anyway, the clip is out there, and I find myself, in order to make the intellectual defense of anything, let alone to love my enemies. The problem is that, first I have to be able to keep track of my enemies philosophically. So, no matter what I do in order to try to be respectful, if a man is an enemy of my primary premise, then he's not going to respect me on any terms whatsoever, and he'll pull any dirty tricks necessary to make his point at the expense of my own to as many people as possible. That's the predatory dynamic of the internet. God, where was I going with this? See, I'm making far too many posts to keep track of anymore in any given day. Because this is the problem with working an 8-hour day on the internet, is no matter what you go find, you want to respond to it, because the paradox is the only time you have the initiative is when you're responding to something. Okay? When you're initiating action, you're by definition spamming, first of all. That's the first social barrier that you've got to understand. It works for the social networks. It works for email, whatever. And it's basically do not spam equals do not send an email, a video, a phone call, a Twitter message, anything. Do not send any information out anywhere until you know that you have permission from someone to do so. Okay? And the problem is, as we've demonstrated in other videos, the internet is designed to make communication to masses of people easy and to individuals hard. Okay, that's the way it has to be done in order to, even pretend to protect the interests of anybody in terms of what I've been calling hard paper law. See, what people don't understand about a social network like, Google Plus, okay, if you just got on the internet yesterday, then when you actually get a reaction to something, if you're going to be insulting, you're technically involved in, basically you've made a post that is more or less permanent with all of your swear words intact in it until somebody somewhere decides to take it down and purge the database. Okay, so it's not only freely available to everybody on the planet, okay, it's also legally actionable by potentially anybody on the planet if they decide to take a big enough offense and spend the money to hire the lawyer. Okay, that's the nature of the information gap in the internet. Okay, there are places along the internet food chain where the problem with being able to get traffic that actually does anything, for like a traffic exchange, okay, you have to be a more advanced marketer than you are when you first sign on to a traffic exchange. So in order to make money from the traffic exchange, you've got to solve the problem of how am I going to reach enough people to build my team quickly enough that some of my team on the list I haven't built yet will eventually join such and such traffic exchange and surf along with me, and God help us all, we might actually be able to make some sales together. That's the dynamics of a traffic exchange. The person who is cleaning up on the traffic exchange is the person who owns the script, okay, controls so many thousand users. All right? So, that's why you're paying your $25 a month each. Okay? $25 a month each. You serve 4 of them, it's $100 a month. Okay? With or without a team, because the guy who owns the exchange needs to get paid. So everything starts out stacked against you as an individual on the internet. Okay? And this is even before you consider whether Google is ever failing in their endless quest to do no evil. And I'm assuming that it's not a mere political slogan, hello 1984, okay, that it's not a political slogan designed to prevent thought crimes or whatever. Okay, I'm presuming that they are some of the smartest people on the planet, and that they actually want to cooperate with their philosophy of do no evil. Okay, because if they actually wanted to do evil, like I said, if they actually wanted to do evil, they could eliminate most of the money from most of the planet immediately. It could be done within 24, 48, 72 hours. That's how fast the thing would propagate if they built it into the deep architecture. Everybody is going to the common planetary credit now. and of course you know, what are they expecting? Just as a political outcome, they're expecting riots in the streets. Okay, only they don't do it that way. They're smarter than to do it that way. So they'll probably spend, you know, uh, maybe as much as like a couple of years lead time for the media buy, and like all the news stories for a given 6 months will be, you know what, we really need to eliminate paper money because of yada yada yada. Okay, and you know, that's the way mass media marketing works ultimately. Okay, so there are certain things you can say on a mass level, and there are certain things you'll get, you know, basically you'll get sued by somebody if you're not a big enough player. Okay, and you know, but that's what I mean by people make errors of economies of scale all the time, like, you know, going and cussing out an individual user on Google, let alone YouTube, whatever. So, okay, that is yet another report for today. I don't even know what to title this thing. All right, ramble, ramble, ramble. Good night.